Hi, folks, and welcome to Blind Luck, the search for Harry Greb and his missing fight films. Harry Greb, the greatest middleweight boxing champion of all time, certainly one of the most favorite stories in all of history of boxing that I have loved ever since I was a kid, listening to some amazing stories. And we have them here on the podcast. So please like and subscribe. We would love to have you along for this amazing ride. And this particular show is brought to you by The Combination. The Combination is a brand new book by Michael J. Woods. You got to check it out. It is on Amazon. It is about the lurid past of the history of boxing with the mob. And it is an absolutely awesome read. So check out Michael J. Woods. He is not the same Michael Woods from the Ring magazine. This Michael Woods is a Canadian producer and news writer, and he's had 40 years experience, and this is an awesome book. So go on Amazon and check out The Combination. All right, so today's show is going to be awesome because we have been talking to people all around the world, and it just showcases to me and to everybody else that loves the sport of boxing and our history that this man, Harry Greb, is by far the greatest. And there's people all around the world that are love talking about it. And today's guest is no exception. This is a gentleman that has a great story in the UK. You know, the UK is one of the most amazing places to watch a boxing match. They are so passionate. And today's guest, Dan Morley, former professional, still professional boxer. He'll tell a little bit about his past and about his current life as a boxing entrepreneur, not only online, but he's training people. He's keeping the love of the sport and keeping fit. So here's Dan. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction. How you doing? You all right?
I'm doing all right. You know, we talked a little bit off air about our passion for the sport and the passion for the big guy, Harry Greb. And I told you a little bit about my past and about how I've known about this guy for quite a while and wanted to spread the news, wanted to spread the love for this Pittsburgh windmill that has had such an amazing career. And I wanted to let you tell the audience how you learned about Harry Greb and why you love this guy so much.
Yeah, so obviously I am a boxer myself, so I'm always looking at fighters. I know how difficult the sport is from first-hand experience. And in the last few years, I've been making more content on the old fighters, which is something I've always had a passion for. But like most, it sort of, it didn't dig too deeply into the past. But Harry Greb was someone that I always knew about because of the 45 and 0. And when I was younger, it would always be compared to Mayweather's 45 and 0, 46 and 0, 47 and 0, all the way up to 49, and then obviously 50 with Conor McGregor. So it was always something that I was aware of, but I'd never done much digging into Harry Greb. And then I can't remember exactly when, but a few years ago, sort of 7, 8 years ago, I really dug into Greb. And in the last couple of years, I dug into the entire history of boxing. And he's just an anomaly. There's just no one like him. I mean, I say in boxing there are two anomalies, Harry Greb and Sam Langford, fighters that no one else were able to just mimic their weight jumping feats, the resume, the amount of just Hall of Famers they both fought. You know, those two guys are insane. Langford jumped from lightweight to heavyweight and had close to 50 fights against heavyweights. Hall of Famers, I should say. But the difference between him and Greb is Greb never really lost, whereas Langford would lose or draw. Greb was just freakishly dominant. And I was just so enamored by how this guy that was blind in one eye, didn't have very many knockouts, was able to never lose fights and fight such great fighters at such a prolific rate. And I dug into the career. I dug into the story. I thought this guy must have been a freak. He must have never been injured. But then I heard about the broken arms and the broken noses and the blindness and all of the accidents he was in. And I just thought, wow, just what a story.
The fact that, for me, the fact that he kept getting in car accidents and people were just, he's just that reckless Harry Greb. He was blind.
I know. He's the one, about by all accounts. I mean, I go off of Compton's book. He used to drive like a maniac, you know.
Oh
which,
yeah.
I wish he didn't, because it was ultimately caused the final nose break, which,
Right.
ultimately ended to the end of his life with the surgery complications. But yeah, I mean, this is a man that just lived like no others, like no one else I've ever heard of,
Right.
to also dominate in the ring in the manner that he did too. And yeah, it's phenomenal.
I find that yeah, all those facts are absolutely phenomenal, like you say, and that I found when doing a lot of the research, his character, his
Mm.
the way a lovable rogue. One guy told me that's a great way, I think, to maybe describe Harry Greb, a lovable rogue, because he did things to, there's stories about him trying to get his fight with Johnny Wilson for the middleweight championship and disguising the fact that he had been drinking and maybe the mobsters and or the people that were controlling the betting were being manipulated by this character, and the things that he was doing behind the scenes that people didn't know. I found his character in that part it was very, very interesting as well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he's a fascinating character. It's difficult to learn vast depths because you can only go off what you read. But there are little snippets of Greb that that just warm me to him more. I mean, obviously, the 1910s and 20s was predominant. Well, infamously a time where black fighters would would have to basically wouldn't get title shots. It would be an incredible exception if they were given those big fights. And I love the fact that Greb would not only willingly fight them, but would go out of his weight division to fight the most avoided ones,
Yeah,
like Kid Norfolk. And in doing that,
right.
he was blinded, but he still won. Like, and there are different things in regards to, with Tiger Flowers, the first ever black middleweight champion of the world, as far as I'm aware, which is a monumental achievement considering, that the landscape at the time. But not only did Greb lose to Flowers, but he personally guarded his door after the fight
Right.
and made sure that he took him on the train so he was safe. Just little things like that, and how he would harass people that beat him, to give him a rematch. He would
Yeah.
just wouldn't accept. Yeah, I've never seen someone so fearless, but also, like you say, the character to go out of his way and stand out in those times.
And to do that with Tiger Flowers, like to repeat that is just yeah, the character that he showed. And I remember reading stories about him being so gracious with Tiger Flowers after even the second fight, and yet going and behind the scenes crying because he knew that his middleweight championship that he had worked so hard for was gone. It's heartbreaking, but it's an incredible story because just because the people that I've reached over the last 15 or 20 years researching this at the International Boxing Hall of Fame, some of the stories are incredible, and I just had one recent um, that for me, I wasn't so much shocked, but it may get into the mainstream, and the story is, and this is from a very good source, a historical source, that Harry was actually murdered by the mob, and there's going to be information coming out, um, perhaps in a book by a well-known person about this. And I can't give you any more details because I don't have any more, but they were given to me by a very well-known source that I have. That because Harry didn't cater to the mob, and because he was trying, because Johnny Wilson was part of the group that was controlling the middleweight championship at the time, and finally giving Harry that chance, because Harry would knuckle under, that they had the anesthesiologist was the same anesthesiologist, according to my source, that did the operation with Tiger Flowers a
Mm.
year later.
Because they both died from the same operation, right?
From the
And yeah,
exact same operation, and it was the same surgeon.
mm,
I'm pretty sure it was I see
yeah. I,
when I heard the
I, sorry, carry. Sorry, go on, carry on.
no, when I heard the information from this source, I had to think back, and I remembered that, and it was either a Swiss doctor or a Belgium doctor, and is Juist, Dr. Juist, somebody, um, and he did both surgeries. So
Mm.
then I heard from the source that it was the anesthesiologist that had the mob connection. And
Yeah,
I again, that's all I can say, other than I'm trying to follow up to try to figure out, because that's a pretty, I mean, that's pretty blatant.
yeah. Well, if it's the same, I'd heard the rumor, like I had heard a rumor of that. I mean, I scoured the internet for everything you can get on Greb, and I'd
Sure,
heard, obviously he didn't play by the mob's rules. There are stories of him beating up mobsters that try to bribe him for fights. I mean, again, such as a different character. Other people would have fear, but he was outwardly going out and just refusing. I'd heard the stories, the rumors, but I'd never. There's not a great deal of information on them. So
right.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a tragedy as well.
it's also a good way to keep the a cold case open and for publicity for Harry Greb, because I mean, one of the blatantly for us, the people that love the story and are trying to get it out there. Recently, there was a Pittsburgh um, Walk of Fame that had famous people from Pittsburgh. And there are people, and the petition out there to get a bridge named after Harry Greb in
Mm.
Pittsburgh. And we'd love to have that happen. I mean, again, I'm trying to piggyback on other people that have started this long before I got on this particular platform. But at the same breath, I've seen this, like yourself and people all around the world I've talked to are loving this story because of the importance of where he rests in history in our sport. I guess because in North America, I guess Americans love baseball history. That's a big thing for them. But for me, there's no other history like boxing in any other sport.
Mm.
With the characters like Harry Greb, and he needs to be. People need to know more about that, don't you think?
Yeah, you bring up baseball, and something I've read is Babe Ruth was one of the stars of the time, as was Harry Greb. He was a big star. People would come and attend his fights. There's pictures of him. We are taking his hat off to crowds of people. It just has been forgotten, and it's sad really, because I guess the lack of footage hasn't helped. The fights have been recorded, but no one knows where they are, whether they've ever been seen in the last 60, 70 years or whatever. No one, you hear people claim it, but no one has proof, and no one can source them, whether they've been destroyed or they're still there. Having footage of him fighting would ultimately claim that, but would back that claim. But we do have footage of him training. So, we do have footage of him signing for the Mickey Walker fight. So if we could get that footage, I mean, regardless of how he looks, because the criticism on Greg, and my coach says this as well. He says he looks terrible because he
Yeah.
doesn't. He looks poor in that shadow box. He looks very off
Yes.
balance, very unorthodox, unlike anyone
Yes.
I've ever seen. But from my own knowledge of that footage, that sole footage we have of him, I believe that was around just before the Mickey Walker fight, the training footage
Yes.
too. So he wasn't going to be training hard. He was doing light sparring with Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. I just think, on a nerdy basis, the resume can't be argued. And the argument I always say with Greb and the lack of footage, and the fact that people don't really warm to him because they can't see him, is there's footage of Tommy Loughran, there's footage of Gene Tunney, there's footage of Mickey Walker, there's footage of Tommy Gibbons. That's 4 guys that he has over 10 victories against.
Yeah.
You have the footage, and I think with getting Greb out there now, I don't know who found it, but someone recently released some footage of Gene Tunney in his prime, talking about Harry Greb, about how he was the best fighter he's ever faced and how he broke his nose, and stuff like that gets people interested, because people don't really have the patience to read anymore as much. You've got to
Right.
just get something that catches people's attention to
Right.
the overall story. That once you're introduced to the 45-0, you get some validation from a Gene Tunney, then you start reading the story. So it's a tricky one, really. But I've tried to push Greb out there with the platform I have, and I don't know if it is from the videos that I've done getting traction. But I have noticed other YouTube accounts are starting to make those Harry Greb documentaries now. They're
Right.
coming out shortly, just little by little, which makes me very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier, because then my concept was always Jim Jacobs was the guy that traveled all over the world for the fight footage, and
Yeah.
he didn't have the internet. This is how to do it, is
Mm.
talk to people that have the love and passion for the sport. And you're right. I mean, some of the footage, it is, I mean, but the very fact that Jim Jacobs never saw that footage, he died
Mm.
before that footage was found. And
Oh,
that's too bad.
he never saw that. Oh, I never knew that. I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, he died
Yeah,
in late 80s, and that footage was just found by chance at the University of Southern Carolina.
I
I
never
believe
knew that.
that's where it was. And
Oh,
so you never know where it could land. Um, there's you just never know. My theory could be it could be in an attic. It could have been transferred because of all the different laws that were at back in the day. You never know if someone you can if you do you remember there's footage now. It was just actually out there this morning that I saw a picture of a heavyweight fight, and it was and what it said was it was a 25 round destructive fight, and it was Jim Jeffries and Tom Sharkey. Do you know that fight?
yeah, that's from 1899. Yeah, because I just and it was filmed in a cigarette box, right? Is that the one?
Really,
Yeah, I
really?
believe. Yeah, I just done a video on the best
Yeah,
heavyweights across the entire era, and it's one of the, we have Bob Fitzsimmons versus Jim Corbett, which was before for the heavyweight title, I believe, or it might
yeah.
have been just after. But there's footage of is it Jim Jeff? Is it Jim? No, yeah, Jim Jeffries versus Tom Sharkey. You're right. Yeah, and there's
It
audio
is the
over
cigar
the top.
box.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the one. So they did film that fight, but none of that footage survived. And the footage
Yeah,
we have of that 1899 fight is from someone that smuggled it in a little camera in a cigar box, which I just think is incredible. And got
it's the very fact that they could do that. That's actually when I watched that documentary that won an Academy Award, by the way, and it
oh,
was executive produced by Jim Jacobs in Big Fights Incorporated. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it got me an idea, and that's why it's part of the films or the script that I put in as well, because of the historical significance of that particular fight. And I just saw it out on social media this morning before we got on, and it was like, oh, that's that fight. Yep. And yeah, you knew that it had been. I guess that's the power of that documentary, Legendary Champions, because that's where I saw it.
And I think like there's a very strong possibility that there are no more films of Harry Crab. They've been destroyed. They're very sensitive to fire. There is that strong possibility. But Sam Langford, it's funny you brought up the fact about Jim Jacobs because I didn't know that that footage had been released then. So many years after the Harry Greb footage had been released, so many years after decades after his death. But having looked into these fighters, we have a couple of Sam Langford fights now. So you can see Sam Langford, you can see him, how he boxed. And whether he survives in today's era, that's a different subject, but you can see him for his time. And I didn't know that the way that footage got exposed was a collector had it and he kept it to himself. And the story goes that he was showing his friends this Sam Langford footage that no one had ever seen, similarly to Harry Greb. And one of his friends recorded it and leaked it. So he was just holding on to this footage for decades and keeping it to
Really?
himself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
there's. I've read about that on online. That the Sam Langford tapes were exposed because a collector had them leaked. That he was just holding on to them.
because I have heard the theory that a collector, a very rich collector, has the Harry Greb footage. I'm just wondering why they wouldn't. What's the point of keeping it? Like what? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't understand. Like if you're that rich, what
yeah,
it's not about the money. I don't know. It just historically it would be. I'd be bragging about it. I'd be giving it to the family.
Yeah,
It's not.
I do
That's
think
like,
about it constantly, but I feel like I'll probably go every day thinking about the Harry Greb footage, which
yeah,
I don't think there's anyone else in their 20s that does that. But yeah,
yeah,
it's just a weird one, because it's just for me the thing that appeals, what's the word that just draws me to Harry Greb, right? Is I like the character, like he just looks cool. The story, obviously, but there, when you look at it on a pure boxing perspective, which not everyone does, this is a man that would fight 45 times a year with broken hands and flu, and would win every fight. And then the immediate argument that people that just want to reject it is, oh, he fought bums. No, he fought the heavyweight contenders. He fought the heavyweight Hall of Famers, the middleweight champions, the light heavyweight champions, and then would go and fight another 100 fights after losing, avenge that defeat to a light heavyweight world champion, beat Gene Tunney,
yep.
beat Mickey Walker, beat, all of the light heavyweight Hall of Famers, clear middleweight, and establish himself as the number one heavyweight contender. Like, how could you not talk about a guy like that? No one else has done it. It's just, I find it
Right.
remarkable. And against such adversity too, like to deal with the blindness in the one eye, and not puncher. Like, I know how hard it is. He was obviously strong and very fit, extremely fit, but he wasn't a puncher. A puncher would have more of a notable knockout record over 300 fights than 49 knockouts.
True. I also, my argument to that is well, I mean, you would know more. You're a professional. You actually have been in the ring. But I will say, just my theory is that, just based on reading, he didn't set down on his punches ever. His whole theory was like whirlwind. So, guys like Henry Armstrong, who had the same sort of style, set down on their punches more, so got more knockouts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, but I can't understand how you would be able to beat the brakes off of Gene Tunney by doing that without sitting down on
Right.
your punch. How you would be able to completely debilitate the heavyweight contenders. I understand how you could clear a division doing that, but in order to be able to beat those big guys over and over and over and over, beat them up and put them in hospital. My theory with the knockouts could be that he probably wasn't particularly powerful with one punch, but
Yeah.
also they just didn't stop fights back then. Really, it was a lot more brutal. Whereas now he'd
The-
probably have over 100 on accumulation, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yes. No doubt about that. And yeah, I love the fact that you love Sammy Langford too so much, because being a Canadian, I've always, and my parents are from Nova Scotia,
Oh
so
wow.
I always had this unbelievable love for the guy. The fact that, he gets a little bit of money after a couple fights. The first thing he does is buy a yellow suit and a yellow bowler hat and a big cigar, and starts walking downtown Boston. It's just hilarious that he had the balls to do it when he was 5'7". I'm 5'7" too, so I played some basketball in my day. Tried playing basketball at 5'7". So, in a very small way, I can understand them, the two guys like Sammy and Harry, going up against really big men. Hey, like courage that Sammy Langford had as well.
Oh, unmatched. I mean, both of those guys are in my top five. I mean, I do put Robinson and Armstrong over Greb because I've seen them, because of the knockouts. I think Greb has the best resume I've ever seen, without a doubt. But I can't give him the number one spot specifically over those guys. Just holds that back. But I would say, look, like he's my favorite out of all of them by far. But it's the courage both of those guys had, and Sam Langford. I mean, they're the two anomalies of the sport, both blind in one eye towards the end of their career, both avoided by the champions, both avoided by Jack Dempsey.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like the thing that gets me about Sam Langford is it's not just the weight jumping feats, being 5'7" and knocking out Harry Wills and Joe Jeanette, Sam McVeigh, fighting. I just love the fact that this 5'7" former lightweight would just keep fighting a huge heavyweight Harry Wills and keep losing. I think they boxed 20 times and he lost
yeah,
something like 15, and he knocked
yeah,
him out twice. but he knocked him out twice. It's just crazy courage. But you know, the thing that shows to me about Langford again on a boxing level, not just the character or the brilliant personality or you know the teasing opponents, you know, the oranges and stuff, like, you know, that story. But yeah, this is a guy that beat the greatest boxer of all time at the time at 17 over 15 rounds. He beat Joe Gans,
Joe
who
Gans,
was who's still in some people's top 20s of all time 125 years later. He beat him as a 17-year-old. Like, and then like 2 years later boxed Jack Johnson at heavyweight. It's just like
yeah, he's it's incredible how great Sam Langford is, and glad that guys like you who do have a big social media can throw these guys' names out there so that people know. UK is so big into boxing; they need to know a little bit. It's not like you guys don't know. You know your history better than anyone in North America does, so that's great. But anytime you throw out Sammy Langford's name and Harry Greb's name, that's cool with me, because where do you said you have uh, Ray Robinson number one. So tell me your top five.
Well, I wrote a book on the top 9 because, in
Yes.
my opinion, there are 9 in history, 9 men that you could put as number 1. You can make a case. Really, it's Robinson. Like, for me, my top 5 is Sugar Ray Robinson number 1, Henry Armstrong number 2, Harry Greb number 3, Sam Langford number 4, despite the losses, just because of the resume. And then my number 5 would sway between the rest. It would probably be Muhammad Ali, because I think his resume is just incredible too, and the impact and the comebacks. And you know, this is a guy that beat Sonny Liston when people thought Sonny Liston would kill him. Sonny Liston went on one of the best runs ever going into that fight at heavyweight, and he beat him controversially, but he'd already beaten him. You know, the George Foreman wins, the Joe Frazier wins. The other all-time greats that I think you could potentially put as number 1 of all time would be Roberto Duran, because I think Roberto Duran's prime is so underrated. This is a guy that beat Ernesto Marcel at featherweight as a teenager, and then went 72-1, beat prime Sugar Ray Leonard, come back, beat Davey Moore, Iron Barkley, nearly beat Marvin Hagler. You know, it's just insane.
Yeah.
Willie Pep, I would have in there. Ezra Charles,
sure.
I think Ezra Charles is probably the most underrated boxer in history.
Yes, you are. You nailed that for sure.
His run as a middleweight alone is incredible. The guys beating Charlie Burley and guys like Teddy Yaros and
Archie Moore.
Yeah, Archie Moore. He beat him 4 times out of 4. and then yeah, you know, clear. I think. I mean, he's the greatest light heavyweight ever. You know, those were just his middleweight wins, the Burley wins. He then went up to light heavyweight, beat Archie Moore 4 times, and beat Gus Lesnovich and Joey Maxim and Archie Moore, the champions of his time. He beat them 9 times out of 9. And then, you know, the Jimmy Bivins, you know, all of the Black Murderers Row guys, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, he would be in there. And there's one more. I wrote a book on it, and I always forget one. I always label 8, but there's someone. Joe Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Joe Louis. I'm a big fan. Yeah. I have him number 1 as heavyweight.
You can't argue with the dominance. You know, I mean, the thing with Joe Louis that I think never ever gets mentioned. There's 2 things. Is the Bum of the Month Club is harsh, because a lot of those guys were ranked in the top 10, and that's what I think is important with understanding the context of history. It was a media term. It's like Chavez with the 89 bums. It's not true. Like, there's so many great fighters in that streak.
Yes.
But with Joe Louis, I mean, 25 successful consecutive defenses over 11 years. It's the longest reign ever. But before he was champion, he beat every single champion that came before him. You know, he beat Max Baer, he beat Primo Carnera, he beat Sharkey. You know, he beat like 4 champions before. So in today's age, he would have just been undisputed for 11 years. He would have been champion for longer with more belts now. He would have probably had like a 13, 14-year reign or something along those lines.
Wow. Right.
So, incredible. You can't. I think Muhammad Ali's resume overall is probably a bit better, with names like Liston and Foreman and Frazier and Shavers and Norton and do you know what I mean? But Lewis
Sure.
was the boss. He was the man. Wasn't
Yeah, I go back and forth. There's a book out by Lee Groves. Lee is probably the top historian in the world. I don't know if you know the name.
he? Yeah.
And he did he works for what's the boxing company that counts the punches.
CompuBox. CompuBox.
He works for CompuBox, but he's also the historian for the International Boxing Hall of Fame,
Oh wow.
and he wrote a book, Ali by the Numbers. So what he did was he went back to every fight that he could recount the punches, and it's a
Mm,
huge book. It's encyclopedic in size. It's actually really easy to read. It's a lot easier. It's statistic, like
mm,
it's graphs and statistics, and I think it proves that Lewis is number one. He doesn't say it. It's
mm,
only what my interpretation reading this book going, wow, these numbers, because he took so many punches at the end of his career. And I know that you have to gauge it's the end of his career. I'm not talking about Trevor Burp, or the end of his career, but from George Foreman on kind of thing.
mm,
But I do, yeah, he's the most iconic sports figure in the history of man.
mm.
There's nobody
Without
better than
doubt.
Ali.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't.
Without.
I would never. Comparisons like this seem petty because they're
Mm,
so great, and it's not. It's really not the point of being trying to. It's it's just an opinion, and so that's the one thing about social media I've noticed is that I I just have an opinion, but I don't throw it in people's faces because I totally get that Muhammad Ali's the number one by anybody, even if he was number one overall as over Sugar Ray Robinson. I don't. That's fine.
yeah.
He deserves it in a lot of ways. I like the fact that you have a list of people that you can make an argument. You can make an
Yeah.
argument.
They can all be number one, right? And Ali, I think he lost a few times to Ken Norton. Don't
Yeah,
get that.
Styles.
And the thing is, you can pick on all of them. There's no footage of Harry Greb. Sam Langford lost or didn't win like 90 fights or something like that. Sugar Ray Robinson. There's not a great deal you can pick on him, but
No, there's
uh,
almost nothing. There's almost nothing.
but yeah, but I mean, the reason I done my social media the way I've done it with lists, I do lists of fighters and I rank them. It's solely just to keep people engaged with the
Yes,
old guys.
for
Because
sure.
if I just do Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, they get loads, and then I do Benny Leonard, it gets none. Whereas if I do the
Right.
greatest lightweights of all time or whatever, the greatest pound for pound fighters, and at number 11 is Mayweather and at number 10 is Leonard, people will be like, what? How's he so great? And some people are just blind to it. They just call me a name and block me. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it is drawing more eyes to those fighters. And I think you touched upon a point there where it's petty to go over who's better, Lewis or Ali or whatever. And you are right. But what it allows you to do is say, well, Lewis was probably the more perfect fighter. Ali had a ban, which builds his iconic status, but we never really
Sure.
saw those prime years. Ali took a lot of shots. Lewis had to come back. There's so many things that you
Oh
can
yeah.
you can pick on. It's a never-ending conversation.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, and I try to do my best anyway to make sure that I do it with a smile on my face. Part of it is it's the young boxing fans talking about Mayweather, and my argument has always been that boxing is different than any other sport. Bigger, stronger, faster. His basically that's true in almost every sport, but not boxing because of the weight classes as much,
Mm.
and
But
and
yeah,
and
yeah.
plus the toughness. Who's tougher?
Yeah, it's tough. And look, like I always get accused of being biased to the old fighters. I'm not. I probably enjoy reading their stories more because their stories are more
Sure.
animated. But you look at a Manny Pacquiao. I mean, his story is crazy where he's come from. But
Unbelievable.
I get criticised for not liking Floyd because I have him at like number 11 of all time, and then some people criticise me for having him too high, but it sways really. But I find that I think his impact on boxing has been pretty bad, with the crushing the old fighters to boost his own thing and people jumping on the 23 world champions that he beat. No one beat more, even though he had 4 belts and twice the different amount of weight divisions. It's very simple to debunk that if you know your boxing. But, in regards to the actual modern versus the old school argument. Listen, I've been in the ring as a pro now, and I know I've sparred world champions. I know the levels, and I don't think Jim Jeffries would beat Tyson Fury. I don't think Jack Johnson would probably beat Alexander Usyk, but you have to judge it for their time. I think when you go that far back, there are definite that far back. There are definitely adjustments. John L. Sullivan ain't going to go in and become heavyweight champion now. But
Right.
I think you reach a certain point where the sport developed, and you have your anomalies. You have your Harry Grebs, you have your Benny Leonards, who Benny Leonard could be a modern fighter. You have your Gene Tunneys, who I'm adamant those guys would survive now and thrive now.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think boxing in the 20s and the 30s and the anomalies in the 10s actually had the toughness, like you say, that isn't. It's not that it's not there now. You look at someone like Terence Crawford; he's insanely tough mentally. It's just an inner drive that he has. But on the whole, fighters don't need to be as tough these days. It's not required. Right. The landscape's different because back then they needed to put food on the table. So you had that toughness that they have. But one thing that I found is probably from when Jack Dempsey catapulted boxing into the forefront of sports, it became the major sport for years and years and years. And so many people would box and so many tricks would be taught up close. The inside fighting tricks, the shoulder roll. And this is another thing with Mayweather. People think Mayweather invented the shoulder roll. He didn't. There's footage of Jack Dempsey, Benny Leonard using the shoulder roll. And George Benton in the 1960s was the one that brought it to the forefront. So these tricks have been around for a very, very, very long time. And from what I've experienced now and what I've been able to teach myself in the ring is that lots of people don't know these tricks. And even at the high levels, people don't know how to fight like Duran or Armstrong on the inside. And you're right about boxing with weight divisions. But in regards to the development of the sport, the natural progression, you have to write off the old fighters. It's not true, because one is the spirit, and two, I don't know anyone that could say how the sport's evolved. I don't know anyone that would be able to deal with having Henry Armstrong there. There's no evolution that can deal with that, because he's still making you miss up close. And I think a lot of those skills aren't taught anymore. I think a lot of the old school value, tricks in the sport are forgotten. And I think if you put a Henry Armstrong, it's hard to say with Greg because we never saw a fight, but a Sugar Ray Robinson, a Willie Pep, they would thrive in today's era, even as they were. That's just my opinion on it.
I agree 100%. I think that I try to at least give modern day fighters as much kudos as possible. In fact, when we talk about Mayweather, I think he's a great fighter, but I don't know where. I haven't made an actual list, but I have argued the fact that I knew of 20 fighters that were better than him, pound for pound. And I mean, that was kind of just, and some guy said, no, you don't. And so I wrote them out. But that doesn't mean that he's...
It takes learning those fighters to understand, right? And they won't do that.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
But the one thing that I've noticed about modern day, because they also say that Mayweather's the greatest defensive fighter, and you mentioned the shoulder roll because he invented it. I think that my argument, I've never heard this argument before, and I just, by watching him fight Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, do you know Chocolatito? Yeah. You know how great he is. If you watch him fight, he's the only defensive fighter that goes forward all the time. If you watch him, he
Mm.
hardly ever gets hit, and yet he's in the pocket every time. He's right in the pocket, going after it, head right there, and somehow he misses. He just
Mm.
uses his head. His defense is incredible. He rarely gets kudos for it, but yeah, it's um,
He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. He uses a lot of subtle shoulder stuff too, body transfer in order to be in a position. The shot will glide off the shoulder. He's amazing. You know, my favorite fighter was Gennady Golovkin. It used
right,
to baffle me how the HBO commentators would say he has no head movement. It would just baffle me. You know, towards the end of his career, he got hit more, like most fighters
right,
do. In his prime, you know, it's subtle shoulder stuff, and there are many great. Henry Armstrong never stopped moving forward, but he would ride stuff off the shoulders. Roberto Duran, probably the greatest mix of aggression and defense at the same time.
sure,
Chocolatito and Alexis Arguello, his idol. There are many, you know, and I think Mayweather has been lucky really to have the current landscape that he's got, where he can pick his fights. I think he is one of the greatest boxers we've ever seen in regards to his skill. I wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily say he has the same mindset to put him as the greatest of all time or in that bracket. That's why I didn't put
yeah,
him there. But you can't deny he's phenomenal. You know, in the same sentence, you've got Manny Pacquiao, who boxed twice the amount of divisions as Mayweather. He boxed across 10 divisions and did fearlessly fight anyone, but he lost. So, you know, in the modern landscape of boxing, he gets put down because he didn't lose, which I think that's a negative, really. Fighters losing and that getting basically their greatness deducted by modern fans for losing. I just think that's ridiculous.
yeah, and you can. I mean, that's the one thing that you can point at Mayweather having a big part of that with the big zero, thinking that that's a big part of the reason why he's the greatest of all time. So that's unfortunate, but hey, this is why the debate continues. And I mentioned Lee Groves' name earlier. I was doing an interview with him, and I said, I was reading an article one time many years ago. I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, that had the audacity to come up with the idea that Willie Pep was the number one fighter of all time over Sugar Ray Robinson, because he didn't have the punch. He had to be better than Robinson because Robinson could knock you out, had 120 knockouts, and Pep didn't have the knockout power. So that was his philosophy. And I was saying this during an interview with Lee, and he goes, Scott, that was me. That was my article. He had written it. It was the very first article he ever wrote for, I think, KO magazine, when he was 18 or 19 years old. So that's how long ago he and I are about the same age. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but
people have,
he certainly could have a case, you know. I mean, where it's like Paulie Malignaggi, right? Paulie Malignaggi's done very well considering he hasn't got the punch. To go 62-0 and 72-0, and then finally meet your nemesis that you just can't beat,
right.
Sandy Sackler, a guy with 100+ knockouts, and to be able to work him out and you know what I mean, beat many champions of your time, even though you are the champion, go up and down in weight, you know. Willie Pep beat a guy called Manuel Ortiz, who was the
Right.
bantamweight champion for years. No one ever talks about that. And
Yeah.
you know, Willie Pep was amazing. But again, like I love boxing, but I know that not everyone loves boxing. But if you want to find interest in these fighters, look at their colourful stories. Willie Pep went 62-0, which people hear the 50-0 of Mayweather, the 46-0 of Calzaghe today. They go, whoa. He then lost and went 72-0. And during that 72, and this was all as world champion on the most part, during that
Yes.
72 fight win streak, was in a plane crash that broke his
Yeah.
back and his leg, and then won his next sort of like 30 fights like 6 months later. It's
Right.
just what it's
It's
incredible, you know.
it's yeah, it's why they have a major motion picture
Yeah.
coming out about Willie Pep, and long time coming. And that's a great heart tug story. A guy that was the featherweight champion for 12 years and had a run like that. that you've mentioned. What an incredible run! And now, after all these years, I mean, he was quite the character too. I mean, every time he was interviewed, some of the quotes that he had were just spectacularly funny, and he was quite the character. Married 5 times. Uh, again, surviving that plane crash, and then he wasn't supposed to walk or live, and he fought 6 months later. It's an insane story, and that the reason why it's so important, because we both love the sport of boxing and it's more publicity for us. It's also great for this man. He
Mm.
needs the next movie, and it's not just pushing something that I've done. It's pushing that we're trying to do this to get the publicity of Harry Greb, because we believe, just like Willie Pep and all the other great stars of yesteryear, they deserve more recognition for what they've done in the past, and they can still be legitimate today, because Cinderella Man's a great story, but Harry Greb's story is a little different. It has a modern day significance that others don't. It's the missing films, and you never know where they could be.
Yeah, and you know, of all those fighters I talk about, you know, and there's so many incredible stories. Grebs is the most interesting. It just is. It's the most captivating in the ring and outside of it. You know, this is a
Yeah.
guy that had 300 fights in 13 years against the very, very, very best across a ridiculous span of weight divisions, with so many injuries, losing his wife, siblings, fighting all over the country. You know, 45-0 in 1 year, probably the most dominant fighter we've ever seen, and no one knows him. It's just, I find it insane.
That's exactly. I always say, you know, you when I talk about, I always um, look dumbly at somebody, say, "You've heard of Leonardo da Vinci, right? You've heard
Yeah,
of, you know, Einstein,
yeah,
but you haven't heard of Harry Greb." And you can just throw with sports too, right? Wilt Chamberlain. Well, yeah, that's the basketball star. Why don't you know Harry Greb? So this is why it's important to keep the conversation going, and finding the films. And you never know. We never know. It could be something that could, you know, change the course of history of the sport. You never know. And you know, we've seen in the past. In fact, Charlie Chaplin's second movie that disappeared was found at a garage sale. Someone had picked it up. It was an 8mm film, and the guy just collected 8mm films. So he brought it home, put it in the projector, checked it out, and it was the only known copy of Charlie Chaplin's second movie, and it was like from 1910, 1912.
so I
Oh,
lost you there temporarily.
hey,
Sorry. Yeah. Um,
hey, no worries.
yeah, I was going to say, like, there's a Hemingway quote about Harry Greb as well. So, you know, if you can
Oh
link
yeah,
him to big names that people know Hemingway, you know, and I
right.
can't remember exactly what it is, but it goes along the lines of, he was talking to someone that didn't know Harry Greb, and he says, "You don't know one of America's great heroes," or something like that, you know. So
That's
yeah,
almost exactly the quote, my friend.
yeah, I
That's
remember
the
reading it.
I will send you the link with my Hemingway opening, because Hemingway is a big part of the story. Because, like you said, the quote is something to the effect of, uh, "Imagine anyone not knowing one of our greatest Americans." I just looked over at the Blind Luck poster, because that's what's on the front of the Blind Luck poster. We are sorry that we kind of lost you here, Dan. So we're going to end the show now. We want to thank you for coming on and chatting. We're going to get you on as soon as we can when we get the next big fight. I'd love to talk to you about your impressions of modern day boxers and modern day matchups. If you don't
Yeah,
mind, I'd love to talk to you about that.
yeah,
And so I'm going to say goodbye. And again, thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. And it was fantastic chatting with you. Stay along, and I'll talk to you after the broadcast. Love chatting with you. Thanks very much. That was Dan Morley. Wow, some great information and passion for the sport of boxing, especially Harry Greb. And lots of great information about pound for pound talk. You know, he's got Sugar Ray Robinson as number one, and then he has the great Henry Armstrong, number two. Not a bad list at all, with Harry Greb and Sammy Langford. And then number five, hey, why not Ali? He's one of the greatest of all time. And also wanted to make sure that everybody checks out The Combination by Michael J. Woods. It's available on Amazon. It is an amazing book. It's all about the history of the mob in boxing and their control of the sport in many different weight classes. It is a fantastic read. Again, it is available on Amazon, called The Combination. And it is a fantastic read and great for a Christmas gift. So make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Harry Greb and Blind Luck. We'll see you next time.